Hi everyone, I'm Greg. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Zoomcar, India's first and largest 100% self-drive car rental service. So today I'm here to talk a little bit about Zap. Zap is our new program. We're really excited about it. It's fundamentally changing the way we think about car ownership in India. It's something we unveiled earlier this year, and we've had really a tremendous response. And fundamentally, it's really just about the idea of individuals who want to buy a car, but realize that the car is not going to be used all the time. They don't need the car all the time, and so when they're not using that car, why not actually have that car earn some money for you and help offset that EMI payment, help offset those other overheads that come with car ownership here in India. So we really thought this was a great market to key in on and tap into and allow people to leverage their car to actually share with Zoomcar and earn a little bit of money on the side. And so that's what it's all about, and we're going to talk more about it today. But before we do that, I wanted to take a step back and give a little bit more context around what is Zoomcar, so what is the self-drive car rental market? Because ultimately, if you're going to collaborate and partner with Zoomcar, you have to be really comfortable with the fundamental model that we're operating and that we're running. And so it's really all about self-drive. So we're not into chauffeurs, we're not into taxis, we're into the self-drive market, which is a market that globally is actually about 75 years old. It's something that's been going back from the time of World War II and actually even earlier. So when we think about what the overall ecosystem looks like globally, that's actually a very helpful, instructive point. So you think about, well, what about countries like the U.S., what about countries like China? Those are often benchmarked to India. And if you look at those markets and then you look at the rest of the world, and you think about the total aggregate number of cars that are in the self-drive ecosystem, it's really astonishing. And then you think about the US, it's about almost 2 million plus cars. And so you're looking at 20 lakh cars. You're looking in China at a market that's already over 2 lakh cars. Now, India, we're still in a very, very nascent stage. We're actually about 3,500 cars, of which Zoomcar has about 70% market share. So it's actually something which is still very much taking off, which is exciting because it means that we have a very, very long way to run. And if you look out at the rest of the world, you have another 20 lakh cars that are there. So it just shows that the ecosystem is really poised for a huge explosion. And that's really buttressed by a couple of other larger macro trends which we see across the country here, and that's around disposable income. The idea that disposable income has gone up for most urbanites anywhere from sort of 3 to 4x over the last decade, and this is something which is again very, very powerful. Because really it's the core city dwellers, city workers, city users who are powering Zoomcar, who are powering self-drive as a concept and as an idea. And that's something which is set to propel further and double again over the next couple of years. And so that's what's going to help ensure that the base continues to grow and continues to get us closer to China, Europe, and the US as it relates to self-drive cars. So we think about the actual ecosystem of ownership today in India. And this is also where it's really astonishing because you have on a per 1,000 people, India has less than one car. Where you look at the U.S., it has 750. You look at a country even like Brazil, almost 100, and it's quite astonishing to see those numbers. And when you think about even percent of households, even in the big cities, on a percent of household basis, you're still at around 10% or even lower. So that gives you a better sense, even still today, that the market has just an enormous way to run and grow as we come along here over the next couple of years. And so, finally, as we think about the projections for the Indian market in general, we talk about today being around 3,500 cars. We're very confident that we'll see that going to 20,000 plus cars by 2018, and then by 2020 going to another tripling and quadrupling to get to north of 80,000 cars. So that's really the way we see the overall market evolution. It largely mirrors what has happened in China and also in the US, going way back. But the idea here, we think it's going to be even more powerful in India for the simple reason that you have other services that are complementing the overall march towards car ownership destruction, if we will. So the idea is that you have Uber, you have Ola, you have metro systems coming up, and that's actually a really powerful point to kind of think about people moving away from traditional car ownership, and that's perfect for Zoomcar, and it's perfect for Zap. So just to talk a little bit more about our position here in India and across the globe, as I mentioned, we're at around 70% market share, and that number is actually growing monthly. And the reason for that is because we've invested very, very heavily in the core technology, the core product, the core customer experience. And so more than anything, it's the customer experience which is going to ensure that customers keep coming back. That's why we have such very high repeat rates. We have very, very high customer satisfaction levels. And we spend really a painstaking amount of time thinking about areas like car condition, the mechanical car condition, the car cleanliness, thinking about timeliness and consistency of delivery of the booking. It's something we're constantly innovating around that. We're constantly tweaking and refining and improving our processes because the way we see it, it's very much about that continuous improvement, and that's what I think we've seen really over the last 1 year, 2 years. We've every month we're benchmarking ourselves, and we're seeing that our metrics have gotten consistently better and better as it relates to customer experience, customer satisfaction. And that's the most important thing as you think about a consumer-facing business that's going to continue driving market share. And so that's why we're quite confident in what's happening here over the next several months and several years. And it's sort of buttressed by the fact that you kind of see that our utilization levels, so the occupancy of the cars, are significantly higher than both our Indian peers as well as global competitors. So if you think about the weekday, Monday through Friday, we're consistently running at 2/3 occupancy level, around 65-66%, and the weekday for most players globally is around 35%. So and we're pricing it at a reasonable level. It's not like we're heavily discounting. We don't really believe in discounts as a company. So you see that just being a couple percent of our overall base, which is very, very small compared to other even e-commerce players in India. And then on the weekends, we're seeing that we're certainly very much thriving as well. So this is where we're around 80% on occupancy levels in the weekend versus around 70% for other global comps. And so that kind of blends out our overall occupancy utilization levels to something around 70%, which is about 20% more than the global average. And that's really what is going to propel and drive the business forward and ensure that as a partner to Zap, as an associate in our program, in our sharing program, you will earn very healthy numbers, very healthy revenue to help offset your overall monthly cost base. And so that's, I think, what has certainly propelled the early growth of the overall model and helped prove it to be quite successful, even though it's still in its first year of operation. So finally, just to say, we have very, very strong backers from an institutional perspective as investors. So this is an important point whenever you're going to collaborate and partner with any company. It's important to know who is backstopping that company and who is supporting that company. And for Zoomcar, we're actually the only car rental, self-drive car rental player in India who is backstopped by large institutional investors. So our smaller competitors, haven't really been able to secure, that type of partner. And I think it again speaks volumes for what we've been able to achieve in a short time, as well as the overall customer experience. But more than that, I think they're very confident in our vision for the future. They're very confident in also the Zap program, very supportive of that. So Ford is actually the Ford Motor Company is our largest investor. They just recently came on board earlier this year, in fact, as part of a $24 million funding round. And so that was something also was contributed a part by Sequoia Capital, which was another one of our larger earlier investors, as well as Nokia Growth Partners, which is also one of our earlier much larger investors. And so we're very excited to welcome all these guys back. They've been very supportive over the last couple of years as we've grown and gone across multiple cities in India and introduced models like Zap. And so they'll continue to support us as we move ahead on the path forward. So just to talk a little here now about what it actually means to really own a car. And I think a lot of you guys have a good sense already from a cost standpoint. But to kind of talk through the evolution of the habits and the tendencies, as well as really understanding what sort of the full stack ownership cost structure looks like, and what it really means from a convenience and time factor perspective. Because I think that's something that also people forget, is that not only there's money, there's cost associated with car ownership, but there's also an incredible time factor there, which really sucks bandwidth and takes you away from doing things that you probably find a lot more enjoyable. But one larger trend is that we've seen people consistently from the early 2000s, when you had much smaller cars, like cars like the Alto from Maruti. They've kind of evolved the preference and the taste, where people have been kind of going for bigger and better cars, obviously more features, and that's kind of the expectation. And people want to use the car as a little bit more of a expression of who they are, as opposed to just more purely utilitarian. So I think we've evolved from like an Alto to say a Swift to maybe now a Baleno or an i20 Elite, cars that have a little bit more spunk, a little bit more character, and so the aspirations, we understand that. I mean, that's part of it. That's part of the fun. That's part of the joy of it. And we're very confident that Zap can help you as you're thinking about moving up to bigger and better models, different types of cars. We can certainly help you facilitate it by making it more cost effective for you, and making it just more accessible. And so that's really, I think, part of the fun. That's really the name of the game here. But as we think a little bit more deeply about what it means to own the car from a cost standpoint, whichever car you ultimately may select, you really have to think about a lot of these different variables at a deep level, because not only there's a down payment, so presumably most folks like to take a loan, and that's something where you take 10 to 20% margin money, is typically pretty common for people who put down payments on the car. So that may be a lakh or lakh and a half, maybe even 2 lakh, depending on the type of car that you ultimately select. And so along with that, there's the upfront registration tax costs. Then you have some other whatever ancillary fitments you might have from an accessory standpoint, and then the ongoing cost. At that time you also of course put on the insurance as part of it, which you usually remit along with the down payment. But once that piece is done, then you kind of go into the operating side of it. And when you think about the operating side of it, you're really looking at the ongoing EMI cost as the big one, which is there as a fixed cost, of course. Then you think about your overall sort of maintenance costs. You have that maintenance and fuel costs, which are tied to the running of the car, but still significant costs nonetheless. Then you think about the overall cost around, say, parking. A lot of people who live in housing societies or live in larger buildings, there is an ongoing monthly parking charge, which is there, and so that certainly does weigh down overall on things. And then you have to think about again the time factors of going for fueling, going for maintenance, servicing, and dealing, interacting with guys, evaluating and vetting. So all of that is there, and then renewals for these different licenses for registration and the tax purposes. So that, and of course revamping and re-upping your insurance policy. So all of that is there, certainly part of it. And then ultimately at the end of the day, when you have the car for 4 years, 5 years, for 6 years, typically people want to go ahead and resell the car. So that's another cost and expense that comes along with it. So really it's, you think about those elements tied together, it's really not that much fun to actually think about owning a car when you have all of that to constantly burden you and deal with. And we say that why is that so? I mean, really fundamentally, is there not a way to do that a whole lot better? And when we think about one stat which is particularly alarming or troubling, if you will, from many levels, it's the fact that roughly 90% of the time, your car that you buy, that your hard-earned money has gone into, is actually going to be sitting idle, and that's just crazy. That's insane. I mean, the way we think about that, why would you buy anything and just let it sit there and kind of rot, accumulate dust, and see it depreciate, and it's one of the most underutilized assets in the world. I mean, and this is actually not even just for India. I mean, we've seen this. I've seen this globally. You've seen this in the U.S., seen this in Europe and China, but it's actually even worse in India in terms of the idle time because there's so many other alternatives. Like people, okay, you can go, you can take your two-wheeler, you can take a rickshaw, you can take the train, you can take the bus, you can take the local train, you can take the metro, you can walk. There's all these different elements. Some people think a bicycle who are a little bit more adventurous. So these modes of transit are all there, and so people fundamentally don't need the car all the time, and so when you have a cost overheads, I think that's the real pain point, that's the real problem that we're actually attacking and solving with the ZAP program and giving you that solution.